All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. This is the Are You Well workshop, and today we're coming to you from the Wellness Center, and the topic is perfectionism, the good, the bad, and the ugly. My name is Judy Fredericks. I'm your wellness liaison from the Center for Clinical Wellness, and here with me is Dr. Ami Shaw. Would you like to say hello?
Hi, everyone. It's so great to meet you guys tonight.
All right. So when we think about perfectionism, a lot of times we think about the way people see us. And we all know that behind all that good that we do, that we feel that things are not always perfect. And we want to shift your thinking about that a little bit. We want to challenge you a little bit today about how you think about yourself and the idea about excellence and perfect. Okay. So just to let you know, we come to you every month talking about different pillars of wellness. And today, perfectionism. Next month, we'll talk about sleep and then supercharging your brain and restoring your energy. All of these talks are recorded and they are on the wellness website. So you're always able to go back and take a look and catch anything. There's a lot of QR codes that you can scan into. And we always do them at noon one week and the following week at 6 p.m. So we're so glad that you joined us for this evening one. So if you would sit back in your chair, you might have been rushing around and you might have been busy or trying to eat before this. And what I'd like you to do is sit back, have your feet on the floor, and we're going to just do a exercise so that we're kind of all together in the same place. So if you roll your shoulders back, your hands in your lap, and I want you to just take a look at the green gray of the picture that's in front of you, or if you can still see anything out your window, or you might have a picture in your room. Green gray is the most calming thing for your brain. So you want to be able to access green gray and kind of hold that image in your mind. You also want to be able to take 3 deep breaths in through your nose and out through your mouth. So go ahead and do that now. And the last thing is putting your hand over your heart will actually let your brain know that you want that cortisol to come down. You want to be able to go to that next level of calming, and that's a really good sign for it. So when you do the 3 deep breaths and you put your hand over your heart, you actually lay down a neural pathway that reminds yourself to calm, reminds your cortisol to come down. So now that we're in that state, calm state, I want you to be able to close your eyes, and you can put your hand over your heart if you'd like. Take those 3 deep breaths in through your nose, out through your mouth, and I want you just to listen to me. Think of a person who's been kind to you. Could be a grandparent, a teacher, a parent, a friend, a partner, even a beloved pet. Allow yourself to feel this kindness and this warmth. Imagine this person is this being gazing at you with understanding and kindness. Compassion. Imagine this person is wishing you well and sending you a blessing and possibly saying these words. May you be safe and protected. May you be healthy. May you be held in kindness and compassion. Sit there just for a moment, take a deep breath, and then stretch. So arms out, stretch around your back, hands over your head, grab one wrist and pull to the side. Grab the other wrist, pull to the other side. Put your hands behind your back, opening up your chest. Take a deep breath, especially if you sit over the computer all day, and then just shake it out, right? So I think that's just a good way to always get started. So our objectives for today is to define perfectionism and imposter phenomenon, right? We want you to have an awareness of yourself, your self-worth, your value, and your boundaries, and to gain some understanding about the good and the bad of the perfectionism. We also want to leverage some of the perfectionism for success because there are some good things about it. And then finally, just kind of review some of the resources that are available to you. Having high standards is a good thing. That's how you got here, right? That's why you're here at Rush and you're excellent. And you strive for excellence as a concept to explore, and it shows you have a good work ethic and strong character. And that's what we want to raise up. We want to soften some of the language. Not everyone is a perfectionist. And I think it's important to emphasize that perfectionism is good and bad.
And so, we always like to start everything off with a definition of what we're talking about. And so, what is the definition of perfectionism? What does it mean? Because often when we're told that we're perfectionists, or someone has told us previously earlier in our life that we're perfectionists, we've often wanted it as a badge of honor, right? As like a really good thing, especially in the careers that we're in. And so, what is the one of the definitions of perfectionism? And that's a personal standard, attitude, or philosophy that demands perfection and rejects anything else, right? And so, like, that's pretty hard, right? It demands perfection and rejects anything else. And the problem with this is, who decides what perfect is, right? How do we have that definition? What's perfect to one person is not perfect to another. And how do we know that we've reached that standard, and that standard is often completely unattainable? So how can how can we ever reach that standard? And so you can see that in this context, perfectionism could be really damaging to us.
So we want to be able to learn to recognize perfectionism and how it shows up with us. And sometimes it has to do with what you hear yourself say, that all these should statements that I should have known, I should have known better, and that you criticize yourself. You put yourself in a position that is very difficult to lead up to. So perfectionism creates a fear of making a mistake. Over time, the belief can grow into a feeling that one's not capable of others. And you want to check in where that comes from. Sometimes competition can come from inside. So have you been celebrated as you were growing up for being the best? Have you been shamed if you were mediocre? Consider your culture, your family values. Think back to primary school and your rules. Family rules, school rules, nonconformance might have resulted in being shamed. And that's a really important thing for you to pay attention to where those things come from. Think about when you are in a group project. Do you take over the group project to improve your overall standard? Or was it at the expense of time and sleep? And think about, was it worth it? Sometimes we have some serious downsides to this, that you need to have perfect conditions for it even to start work. That can be a problem. You need to have a view of really pushing past diminishing returns, endless hours, health issues. And you think about, does it really make a difference? Is there a way that you could leverage the team to get that excellent outcome and still have your own self-value? And there might even be some deep-seated unhappiness and internal struggles, and definitely internal talk when you're going for perfectionism, because you feel like you never measure up to yourself. Finally, there's a disregard for your health, and you find your mission and you push through, whether it's holidays, kids, whatever, and that's just not sustainable. So you have to think about if you're building this wall of pain by trying to be perfect. So what I'd like you to do is think about what's on the screen. And so there's 11 things that tell if you're a perfectionist. And so maybe you don't have all these tendencies, or maybe you don't have them all the time, but instead you strive for excellence. So you want to be able to consider how you interpret your reply. But what I'd like you to do through the magic of internet, if you would go to slido.com and use the code that's on the screen. And if anybody is calling in, it's slido.com, SLIDO.com, and the code is UAMAOK. And on the next screen, you will also have that, if this is going to work here. Here we go. All right, so we're combining last week's scores along with these scores. So as you select the answers, it will show up on here. And you can pick as many as you like. I think what's interesting is how things fell out last time. And my hope is that you're able to do this. Here we go. Good. Thank you. So still extremely high standards is winning. Oh, extremely hard on yourself. Okay, that just jumped ahead. And I think to be in the professions that we're in, that's pretty much how we push to get to where we are. And so it's hard to say don't do it because it's very competitive and you want to be the best. It may be good that you spot mistakes that others don't see, but at the same time, again, you don't want to risk yourself, your values for all of this. All right. So we're still extremely hard on ourselves. And I think that's probably going to be where we're going to be with this one. But if you take a look at some of the other things, that the all or nothing approach, that's kind of hard. That's to be able to do all or nothing, or procrastination. And we'll talk a little bit about that, about waiting for the exact right moment to start, because it won't be perfect. And I think that those kind of things are very difficult, because sometimes you won't get started at all if you don't at least jump in and get things going. All right, so I'm going to turn it back over to Ami, but thank you for everybody who jumped in on the survey. We'll talk a little bit more about perfectionism.
Right. So we have those 11 traits, and you can see, what may be a little bit more relevant for you. I know in the past when we've done that poll, there are people that have clicked 11 out of 11, like all of those things describe them and how they sort of feel about perfectionism. And it could be that people only have one or two of those 11 traits that really played a role, or it could be that we have all of those traits that play a role. I know for me, it's all 11. So how can this show up? How does this actually show up in our life? And it's usually when we have something to do, right? We have a goal or a task assigned to us, and we are given that goal or task. But a lot of times what happens is that goal or thing that we want to do, especially if it's for ourselves, is an ill-defined goal. We haven't really set what it would look like for us to be successful at that, right? We haven't decided that, like, if I'm taking a test, that I'm going to get 80% of the test rate and I'm happy about that. We've decided that we just have to do amazing. We just have to do better than everyone else. We just have to maybe even hit that 100% on every single thing. And the problem with that is that those are often really unrealistic standards. And when we set those unrealistic standards, we know that we're intelligent people. We know, though we may not admit it, that there's no way that we're actually going to ever really reach that goal. And when that happens, of course, no one wants to feel like that. So we know we can't reach that goal. We have that fear of failure, and so we start to procrastinate. We don't want to do that thing because we know we're never going to be able to reach that unrealistic standard. And when that happens, we focus a lot on the results. We don't focus on the journey or the path that they were taking to get to that goal. It's just, do we meet that unrealistic standards? And when we can't meet those standards, we're highly critical of ourselves. Like, look, we can't do it. Look, I knew we couldn't do it. Or some element of that, we can have this really negative self-talk that then again just feeds into this cycle, and it can repeat itself over and over again.
Thank you. So there's different types of perfectionism. So we want to talk about that for a moment. The whole idea about the self-oriented perfectionist, that's where the internal drive for absolute perfection. And you need to think about some of the symptoms of that is very high anxiety, rumination, where you have that hamster wheel going day and night, and you have a hard time sleeping because you're always thinking about how you're going to make it perfect. And then that moves over to where the demands of what you're being asked to do is just really outdriving any bit of resilience that you have, and that it does lead to burnout. Now, if you have socially prescribed perfectionism, that's where you actually believe that others expect you to be perfect. And that's really hard when you have other people think you're thinking that they expect you to be perfect. And some of those things become more physical, where you have the headaches, the irregular sleep patterns, and eating disturbances. And finally, other-oriented perfectionism. And this is actually the most common, and this is why it's really hard to be in a group if you're a perfectionist, because you expect others to be perfect, even if it's a partner or a team or whatever, but it ends up sabotaging relationship because it really can incite fear and display of anger if other people don't meet your expectations. And so that's a really difficult way to be in a relationship with somebody.
And, we've talked a lot about the negative aspects of perfectionism, and how it can really impact our lives. But, nothing is black and white, right? Everything is a shade of gray. And so perfectionism isn't all bad, right? We don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. But because perfectionism, or that striving towards excellence, has led us to our current state, right? And has led us to want to strive for more knowledge, care about what we're doing, care about the people that we're doing it for. But it's finding that delicate balance of, when is it good enough versus when are we taking it to the extreme and hurting ourselves and hurting other people. And it's when we're cheering for other people, but we're a drill sergeant to ourselves, right? We have no self-compassion when we take that perfectionism to the extreme. So this is about, it's not about not wanting to do our best, but it's how can we define what our best is and do our best in that context without hurting ourselves.
Yeah, that's a good way to split that out. I think that was a good idea. So here's a little test for you. So what I'd like you to do is just kind of follow along here and think about the internal dialogue that goes on for you as you're trying to strive for the best or perfection or excellence. And a lot of times you look around and you see people seeming like they got it. Like, why do they act like they got it and I don't got it? So if you think about a swan, and they are looking very graceful on the surface, but they are paddling like crazy underneath. And I think that's where we all are. We're doing that swan kind of thing. So then here's the exercise. I'd like you to say something nice to a person, either in the chat or send a text. So go ahead and send a compliment, send a greeting, send anything, so that you're sending out something positive. So go ahead and do that right now. And as you do it, pay attention to how it feels. Are you smiling just a little bit because you know that the person that's going to get this unexpected text will be pleased? They'll be happy about that. And will they send you something back? That's another question, right? If they do send something back, my hope is that you will accept their appreciation, that they will thank you, and you will appreciate the fact that they said thank you. It was good to hear from them, whatever, but not to negate the compliment. And that's a really hard thing sometimes, especially if on the second time, could you say the same thing to yourself? Did you send something to say, I love you, or have a good day, or you're beautiful, or can't wait to see you this weekend? Do you feel the same about yourself? That's the real test. Can you hear it if you said it to yourself, or do you negate it? And so I think those kind of things, it's really important that you think about what that inner voice does to you. And if we don't acknowledge our own success, it not only denies us the endorphin release that we get from feeling good about it, but it also blocks energy restoration. And that's a really important thing, that when you work through gratitude and positive, your brain lights up in way different ways in an MRI than when you're doing a problem solving or something else. It's just a beautiful thing that you see that gratitude happen. So the fact that we had, and we're going to move on to this next one, that if I told you that you had 1 minute to connect all 9 dots without lifting your pen, you would do 4 lines, 1 minute. Could you do it? Now, some of you will Google the answer. Others might have remembered it a little bit, and you'll try it for a little bit. I will give you the answer later, and I'll give you a warning that I'm going to tell you the answer. But when you're trying to do something like this under pressure, where there's a time, you want to be aware of your body sensations and what changes. So there's this triangle that you want to pay attention to, the triangle of awareness, that whenever you're challenged with something, think about your emotions, your thoughts, and your body sensations. And a lot of times your body would be the first thing that'll tell you something's shifting. So you might get tense, you might see your shoulders, and you might think, I can't do this. And then you start to get anxious or overwhelmed, and then you get angry because you're disappointed. There's always something under the anger, some kind of an emotion under the anger. So disappointment, embarrassment, whatever. But all of this comes together. And if you're aware of it, you can take those 3 deep breaths that we did earlier, and you can relax those shoulders and say, all right, let me come at that a different way. And so being able to kind of challenge yourself is really important. And my mindfulness instructor would say, when you are overstressed or overreacting, it can feel like putting together a parachute while jumping out of a plane. And you think about how often that feels like that. And that's really true, that what happens in your brain is it like sends everything to survival mode, and you can't do the fine motor skills. And so that's why sometimes when you're afraid at night and you hear a sound and you're near your home and you go to grab for the keys and you fumble, because your fine motor skills are gone, because your body wants to run, it wants to do that fight, flight, freeze. And it's just a really interesting thing that happens with that. Well, then we go on to the imposter phenomenon.
Yeah, and so, we're talking a lot about perfectionism, and I'll talk about in a second how these two things are related, but just a definition again, what is imposter phenomenon? And this was originally described in 1978 in High Achieving Women. And it's when people, but it's been found to be pretty prevalent, but it's when people who are high achieving individuals, which we all are on this call, despite our objective successes, fail to internalize their accomplishment and have this persistent self doubt and fear of being exposed. Like if people only knew. It's very similar to what Judy was talking about earlier with the swan, right? If people only knew how hard my feet were paddling underwater, if they only knew that, I don't have everything all together. And an important asterisk that I want to put to this, or a caveat that I want to put to this, is that imposter phenomenon, there are some parts of it that we are externally given in the world, right? There are a lot of ways in which we're taught we don't belong, that we're taught that we shouldn't be in this space, that we don't look like the people who are in positions of power. We don't look like the people that are around us. And so there is definitely an element of the external forces that can make us feel that way. However, what we're getting, that signaling that we're getting from the outside, we can often internalize. And it's important for us to look at what we've internalized and why we don't necessarily feel we fit. And so we can start to decouple that in our brain, right? So that we can try to not feel those things or not internalize those things, or if we have internalized those things, start to pull them apart. I know that as a personal example, when I decided that I wanted to be a general surgeon back in medical school, there was very, very few women in general surgery. And there were none at the medical school that I was at. And I remember distinctly, I wore this, a sweater I loved. It was a white fluffy sweater. And I walked in to meet with the advisor for everybody who wanted to, a general surgeon who wanted to, for all the medical students who wanted to go into general surgery. He took one look at me in that sweater and was like, no, you don't look like a surgeon. You can't be a surgeon. And this was just a white fluffy sweater that I was wearing. And so we can see how I then for a while internalized that voice that like, maybe I'm not meant to be a surgeon. I don't look like a surgeon. I'm not hard enough to be a surgeon. I'm not mean enough to be a surgeon. And thankfully, I had some other mentors that helped me reverse that thinking, but I very much did initially internalize that. So why are we talking about that in the context of perfectionism, right? Judy, can you hit the next slide? Thank you. And so those voices that we take from the external, I think when we internalize them into perfectionism, right? We're like, if I can just do this thing right, if I can just live up to this impossible standard, then I won't feel like this anymore. then I'll know that I'm not an imposter. Then everything will be perfect. So I think those internal voices in our head, that internal imposter phenomenon, is directly related to perfectionism. So if we can start to pull that stuff apart in our brain and see what stories we've decided to believe, and what stories we've rejected, we can start to really work on both of these things, that imposter phenomenon and that perfectionism.
Thank you. So the way the cycle works, if you think about it, and the thought about when we were working from home, or a lot of us are still working from home, that a lot of times you feel that you need to work more in order to succeed, and there's kind of like a blur. So when a new project comes up, there's that anxiety. You might have that sense of procrastination because things aren't quite right. I don't have all the information I need. I haven't heard from all the people I need to hear from. And so you kind of build up that procrastination. And then if you're able to be successful, you actually have a moment of brief relief. But the problem is, if you are successful and you over prepared, you feel that it's due to a lot of effort. If you are a procrastinator and you were successful, you feel like it's due to luck and you just kind of ignore or push away any feedback. And sometimes it feels like a fake and you have self-doubt, and then the cycle begins again. So you can kind of see how that works. You just kind of brushed off, I was lucky, but then that just increases that self-doubt. And that's where the feeling that you're not meant to be there. And then the next project starts and it goes all over again. And so it's important to be able to stop that cycle at some point and have some positive self-talk.
Right. And why do we want to do this? And like, what is the point of this whole talk, right? And it's about getting back to that purpose that we have in life, right? We all had a reason for why we want to be in healthcare, for why we want to help other people, why we chose this job, this profession, this career over everything else. That passion that we had. And when we're living into our purpose, we really enjoy what we're doing. As human beings, we desperately want to find purpose and meaning. And we do that in our lives in multiple ways and with multiple facets. But how do we find that at work? Why are we doing what we're doing every day? And when we're feeling that sense of imposter phenomenon, when we're feeling that perfectionism that we can't really do everything right, it cannot feel like we're living into our purpose and we don't enjoy what we're doing. And when we don't enjoy what we're doing, or we don't think we belong here, if we don't think we're good enough, then how can we feel like we belong at work? How can we create that environment if we're not feeling that internally? And we know that when we feel like we belong at work, when we have purpose to what we're doing, then burnout isn't as bad, right? We don't suffer the same levels of burnout because we have meaning in what we do. And we're able to put boundaries around what we should do and what we shouldn't do when we've decided what the goal is. What is good enough? What is good enough for me, right? And so we're able to say no to the things that don't bring us purpose, that don't bring us enjoyment. And we're able to lean into more of the things that do really give us that deep sense of, this is why I'm here. This is why I'm doing what I'm doing. And I think I mentioned how common this is. And there's a lot of studies in nurses. There's a lot of studies in people who are in leadership in multiple different roles in business and in medicine. And here's a study from one of our faculty that used to be here actually at Rush. And they looked at general surgery residents across the board. And they found that 76% of general surgery residents had significant or severe imposter syndrome in spite of age, what sex they were, what level of training they were at, what their exam scores were in medical school and in residency. So it didn't matter. None of this stuff mattered. It was just an internal feeling that they had that they did not belong. And everyone in medicine is really highly accomplished, and people would argue that these residents are, but they would argue right back to you, nope, we're not accomplished, in spite of everything, in spite of where they are and what they were doing.
Well, let's talk about what's happening in your brain when all this is going on. You want to think about the amygdala, the fight, flight, freeze center, because that's a lot of times where things happen and you're not able to make that shift to your prefrontal cortex where your logic and your reasoning is. So when you start to have this cycle happening of perfectionism, then you kind of brains on fire type of thing that you want to be able to manage the psychosocial stress that you're dealing with. But if you're not able to make that shift, that's really difficult. So you start out and you have that reaction. Maybe it's anxiety, or, feeling of overwhelmed when you start down a project or start to do a presentation or whatever it is that you're doing. And if you can take that deep breath and give yourself 6 seconds, 6 seconds, you will be able to shift from that amygdala to your prefrontal cortex and have that logic and reasoning and be able to bring down your cortisol. So those 3 deep breaths will make a big difference. Maybe you're doing hand hygiene before you're going into a room that you're a little skeptical about, or you're about to do a particular skill. And if you can just give yourself 6 seconds, deep breath, and be able to calm yourself a little bit, you can move the emotions out of the way and go forward with your thoughts. And that's the really important thing that you want to do that. Without that shift, you feel very overwhelmed and exhausted. You could even start to withdraw. And that's really important that you think about your own mental health, that everybody struggles in a different way. And what you want to practice saying is, I can do this. I've done similar things before, and get permission from yourself to move forward. Because the idea is you really have. When you come up to a new project, it's like that you're a novice, but you have experience. You have different pieces of the puzzle that you're going to put together in a different way in order to accomplish this next skill, task, presentation, whatever it is. And so by being able to do that, I think you allow your brain to calm and be able to have that logical thinking. And so you want to have that ability to do the breath, to be able to kind of bring yourself into the present moment instead of worrying about what happened in the past or worrying about what would happen in the future if things go wrong, kind of thing. And that's a lot of times what we do is we jump ahead that if this doesn't work, then all of these things will happen. And some of the ways that you can tame your brain, especially that reptilian brain, that fight, flight, freeze center, is to think about how you're going to bring that cortisol down. And one of the very first ones is being in the moment. And the best way to practice to be in the moment, to teach your brain how to do that longer and longer, is mindfulness, yoga, any of those kinds of things that actually have you focus on how you're feeling, focus on your breathing, and it kind of trains you to focus instead of being kind of popcorn all over the place. And that's a really important thing. So the breathing part is very good about being in the moment. You can practice that even when you're driving to rush, and think about how many times that you don't realize that you're already halfway there and you were thinking of other things and you hadn't paid attention to what was out on the road. So there's a lot of times where you can catch yourself and kind of bring yourself into the moment. And the more you do it, the faster you can get back to it. And that's a really important thing. So the first steps in kind of taming the brain is acknowledge your feelings, not to judge. That's a really important thing. Feelings just are, not good or bad, they just are. And avoid numbing agents, wine, cookies, drugs. When you numb both joy and sorrow. You can't numb one without the other. And so that's a really important thing. That idea about being able to bring in that green gray of nature is very calming. So if you have an image somewhere in your room, your apartment, your home, or if you have a picture of somewhere you've been or like to be, make that something that you glance at frequently so that you have the image that you can remember that and be able to take those 3 deep breaths while you're thinking about that. That's a really important thing. The thing you can do is you can use what's called the STOP method, S-T-O-P, okay? And it's helping you lay down these neural pathways to calm. So the first thing is S, to notice your reaction. It's happening, so notice it. T, to take a step back and breathe. And that's a physical step back, because what happens when you're very anxious, your vision gets very short, very small. And taking a physical step back, or even sitting back in your chair, opens up that visual field. Take those 3 deep breaths. And the O is to observe your inner thoughts, your emotions, your sensations, your external observations, and think about if it's really based in reality, or have you already started down the path of what ifs and if only kinds of things. And then finally, the P is to proceed mindfully or park it. That means stop. No response sometimes is okay. So think about what you need to do to proceed mindfully. And so that might get you back on the track. And again, the faster you do this, whatever you practice becomes stronger. So you want to be able to practice taming that reptilian center, acknowledging your feelings, and be able to, especially to name your feelings. I think that's a really important thing. Like good is not a feeling. Okay is not a feeling. So think about, how do you really feel? All right, so next comes the spoiler alert, because I'm going to give you the answer to the puzzle. If you don't want it, maybe you just don't look at the picture and just listen to my voice for a couple moments, and then we'll continue on. So the whole idea about this, doing this activity, is to give yourself grace. And sometimes you really do have to think outside the box. The things that you thought were true maybe now have expanded. And so you can see about how the lines have to go where they are on the screen, spoiler alert, to make that happen in 4 straight lines without picking up your pen. Right? So can you see where the 9 squares are and how the lines had to do what they did? Okay, good. All right, so we want to be able to develop our awareness of our own boundaries. I think that's so important. And the imposter phenomenon is more common in students, both medical and nursing fields, because of the rapid rate of change and advancement. We feel like we should keep up, but it's close to impossible by ourselves. And that's why teams and coaching is crucial. You need to have people around you. You need to have your peeps. So you want to breathe during hand hygiene, like I mentioned before seeing a patient. You want to breathe before answering a question. There's nothing wrong with taking that deep breath before you answer a question. You want to lay down that neural pathway. You want to share small victories. That's important. That even this, like, one good thing that happens is a really good thing. It doesn't have to be major stuff. And the whole idea of positive scanning, we've gotten so much into negative scanning, the what's wrong and the if only kinds of things, that we don't recognize when something good happens, because most of our day is good, but what our brain holds on to like Velcro is that 2% of bad that happened. Maybe somebody made a comment, maybe you did something that you weren't quite thinking that that's how it would turn out, but that's what we hold on to, because your brain doesn't ever want to repeat those things. So it holds on to the negative stuff, and the positive stuff, like a joke, something like made you happy, or even some, like you had something good to eat, you won't even remember it because it slides out of your brain like Teflon, because you don't need it to survive, but you do need the negative stuff. And so sometimes what we have to do is practice positive, figuring out things that went well for us in order to be able to feel the joy and actually accept the joy, instead of always scanning for the negative stuff. And so sense of humor, sleep and rest, that gives you a really good way to be able to set yourself up for that. And just kind of think about what gave you joy in the last week. I mean, that's like a really good thing to kind of ponder, that you're able to do that. Okay. You also should have a professional no. So it's hard to say no sometimes, because you think that yes is what the person asking wants to hear. And so sometimes you say yes way too fast. You didn't do the 6 seconds. You didn't shift to the logic and reasoning. And then you're thinking, why did I say yes? I can't do that, or I don't have time for that, or I'm not in a great position to do that right now. And so having your professional no is really good. And one of the best things to do is buy yourself time. So you thank the person for asking you about whatever it is, to do a project, to help with something, to help pick up something, whatever it is. And you ask them if they could just text or email you that, so you don't forget, so that you'll give it your full attention when you have a minute. And that way it buys you time to look at your calendar, to consider your options on that, and then decide if that's really something that you can do, and then move ahead. And you do want to thank them again for asking you, maybe offer them somebody else that could do the job, and then ask them to think about you again in the future. And so that's a really good thing, that you have practiced that. So saying it for the first time isn't when somebody is asking you, that you've already practiced it. And I really do believe that calm is just as contagious as irritability or negativeness. So when you're near somebody that is very calm, you can actually feel calm yourself. When you're next to somebody that's very anxious, fidgety, irritable, you kind of pick up that same thing. You kind of get edgy and you end up saying something that you don't mean to. So kind of think about your surroundings, your environment, who you're near. I think those are really important as well. All right, so let's try some perfectionist thinking here. Let's think about how we can shift this. So you want to think about what's realistic, what's attainable. So if you have your goals, think about this. Can I do this in 3 months? Can I do this in 6 months? Kind of thing. Can I do this in 5 notes? And you want to take a perspective of what's possible for you. Think about the reality of it. Think about the big picture. Is there a way to do 60% of it? Is there a way to do 100% of it, but at a longer period of time? And you want to think about some of the things you can do to kind of test yourself or to practice it a little bit. And I think some of the things you can do is maybe tell somebody how you honestly feel. So if they say, hey, how are you today? And you say, oh, I'm fine. What you want to do is to be able to shift the thinking a little bit, because you're saying that because that's what people expect you to say. But if you said, I'm feeling really tired today, or, I'm kind of sad today, I'm feeling pretty overwhelmed today, whatever it is, you want to be able to try that out and see what their response is. And just see how it feels to speak the actual truth. And in order to speak the truth, you've got to have a sense of what's happening in your body. So if you feel tired, to be able to say, I feel tired today, there's nothing wrong with that. It's your feelings. Feelings are feelings, not good or bad. It's just what it is. I feel sad today. I feel angry. I'm frustrated because I'm on the roof of the garage again. Those kind of things. So to be able to say that is a good test, good practice, to be aware of your feelings, be able to speak them. That's important. And once you speak them, you can actually take action on them, because now you are aware of them. And that's a really important thing. You could also do something like purposely have some silence. If you're somebody that chats a lot when you're with a colleague, what if you backed up a little bit and became the listener? Just see how that felt for a little bit, and allow yourself to be that listener, be a good listener. If you go to restaurants, are you a person that always researches it and you make sure that you know exactly what you're going to have? What if you just pick something that you didn't know, or just got an idea from the person taking the order? Like, what do you suggest? And go with that and see what that's like. So those are just different ways to kind of shift perfectionism thinking, to be able to kind of change your mindset a little bit.
And we just wanted to put out there too that this is hard. This is hard. It's not easy to do this stuff. And I like to think of it like, for those of us who are a little bit older, an old school record, right? When we put that needle down on that record player and we played our favorite songs, we wore a groove into what our favorite song was. And if our perfectionism has served us and allowed us to get to this point, we're in that groove. It's really hard to lift that needle out and play a different song. And, that can be hard. This is not a process where we're going to go from start to finish immediately. Sorry. And, when we do this, it's really hard. And as Brene Brown, one of my favorite people, says, sometimes when we walk into the arena, when we're trying to change this stuff about ourselves, when we're trying to live a different way that serves us better, that greatest critic we face is ourselves. And one of her other quotes that I really, really like is that, it's Brene Brown, so sometimes she puts some swear words in there, but if she's like, if you're not in the arena, if you're not trying to change, I don't want to hear it. And you can imagine where the expletives go in there. But, there'll always be doubters, there'll always be other people saying things to us. But if they're not in the arena, if they're not trying to change, if they're not trying to continue to grow and evolve, does their opinion really matter, right? And the opinion that matters most is our own, of ourselves. So this is hard. This isn't an all or nothing, but this can be difficult for everyone, including it being difficult for me on a daily basis, probably a minute by minute basis.
I mean, I really appreciate you sharing some of the experiences that you have for yourself, because I think that makes it more valuable to everybody. And what you said about it's not an all or nothing kind of thing. This next thing I think kind of brings that home, that a lot of times we use the word but. We kind of break up a sentence with the word but, and what happens is we minimize or take out that first part about it, that I'd like to help you, but, or I'd like to do this, but. So think about how many times in your day that happens. And so when you continue to strive for excellence, consider the power of and. And when you're about to say but, switch it with and. So this way you're actually recognizing your value. You are resilient and you need a break. You gave your all and you need to back out. You're independent and you still need others. You were sure and things have changed. You are kind and you have boundaries. Others have it worse and your pain is valid. You did your best and now you know more. I think just practicing that a little bit, you'd be surprised on how good that feels when you can add and in there instead of but. Now, there's some resources that we wanted to share with you, and this is because this is being recorded, you can always go back to this, but these are just good things to be able to read if you want to do any more reading on perfectionism. And then I do want to make sure that you have some resources, because if this is something that you find challenging, that you have that hamster wheel running in your head, or you feel that you're just not good enough, or that you're not supposed to be in the arena, that you're questioning what you're supposed to do, I want to introduce you to the Center for Clinical Wellness and the things that are here to be offered. So from 7 to 7, Monday through Friday, it's hybrid, so you can either be at home or come in person. And the idea that you can have unlimited sessions for free, and that there are well-being coaches, mini wellness retreats, and it includes students and employees, faculty. All of Rush system has the ability to connect with the Wellness Center. The website is on your screen if you want to go to Inside Rush. Once you do that, you're able to schedule appointments, you're able to look at the content library, the wellness newsletter. You can take a look at any of the recordings that we have, any of the events that are coming up. Right now we have the Rush for Gratitude. So that's kind of a fun thing, that if you've been at any of the student events, in fact, there was another one today, that you're able to fill out one of the cards. I think that's just kind of a nice thing to give others some sense of gratitude. If you do make an appointment for clinical wellness, and you can use the QR code, and again, you can go on the Inside Rush. The idea is that you come with something that you would like to do better at. So maybe you feel anxious when some particular thing happens, and you work with one of the psychotherapists on that particular thing, and you find that it's working well for you. And then you come back and you say, you know what, I'd like to work on something else. And since there's no minimum or no maximum of what you can do about visits, you're able to come back again and again. I think a very amazing part of this, not only is the benefit free, but the way that it was constructed in our the space, confidentiality and privacy are both protected and thought about. So whether you're here in person or you're from home, it's very important that you feel confident that your privacy is protected. You can look at both sides of the screen. The side on the left is what I've been talking about at the Rush Center for Wellness, unlimited free sessions. On the right-hand side is our Employee and Student Assistance Program. And so that's outside of Rush. That's our partners called CompPsych, and they're available 24/7 in person and telehealth, and you can schedule with them by phone. They have 5 free sessions, so different from the Wellness Center. But the unique part is that it's also available to immediate family and significant others. And that, I think, is a really wonderful benefit. The wellness pager is another thing that's extremely helpful, that if you or a colleague are just not feeling yourself, that just you haven't been doing okay, you just feel very overwhelmed, you're just not sure where to turn, you're not sleeping, you definitely need to call the pager. And especially if you can't get an appointment, you look on the site and you can't get an appointment on the time or the day that you need, use the wellness pager. It's carried 24/7 by our psychotherapist, and they will answer that phone within the hour. and be able to talk to you at that moment about what's going on, in addition to what's going to happen the next couple days. So it's really good to have the pager 852323 24/7, and it will be answered within 60 minutes. Really a wonderful benefit to have. Now, there's also some things about support, and here we have the rush of gratitude. That's what I was mentioning, and you can scan if you want to go on Recognize Rush, but this is kind of a fun thing during the month of February, and it's just to tell other people how much you appreciate them and give them just some joy. And I think it's just kind of a nice thing. And if you do use Recognize Rush, add the hashtag of Rush of Gratitude, and that'll be kind of fun because then you'll be able to see what everybody else has been saying. Now, if you do feel overwhelmed and you want to work with a peer supporter, that's a little bit of a different thing. So house staff and students and staff can take advantage of a 30-minute free virtual meeting just to talk about whatever you want, whatever is bothering you at the moment. All of our peer supporters have gone through mental health first aid course, and so they are good listeners, and they have good resources to assist you. So that's a really nice program to be able to take advantage of. There's also professional coaching. Right now, the physician group is running and the nurses group is being, new registrations are being taken for the nurses cohort. So if you are a nurse or a physician and want to get some coaching, this is a really good program to take a look at. Mental health first aid, as I alluded to before, we teach that once a month on a weekend, and it's an 8 hour, so it's 2 hours on your own, 6 hours on Zoom. And you just learn CPR for your mental health. And that's a really important thing, that, sometimes when you know that somebody's not doing okay and you kind of notice it, but you're not sure what to say, so you keep walking. This gives you the words of what to say. This helps you yourself acknowledge when you're feeling overwhelmed and what to do, and also check in with others. And I think that those things are very important for your own mental health. We also have the benefit of being able to use Insight Timer at work. So this is like the Calm app or Headspace, and you're able to use all sections of it for free as an employee or student at Rush. And so whether you use this QR code or you go onto the website, the Rush Wellness website, you'll be able to access the free portions of this. And really take advantage of all of it. And I think what's really great about it is that it could be very short, just a couple minutes, like to take a break, or it could be something that you use in the morning. So instead of scanning for all the negative stuff in the morning, maybe you allow your brain to relax and open up, and maybe use Insight Timer as some calming for meditation, or just waking up and relaxing. So every time we do these talks, we look at the pillars of wellness. And so today, talking about perfectionism, so a little bit of stress management, a little bit about social contact kinds of things, that we're able to kind of take that big picture about supporting your well-being. So our hope is that in spending some time with us, and I love the comment that was in the chat about congratulating everybody for connecting and taking time for your own self-care and your curiosity to see what we could offer you. And you want to be true to yourself about your sleep, exercise, and nutrition as well. And so make sure that that's a whole package that you take a look at. So if you have any questions, and I know there's a couple of things in the chat we'll take a look at, that will stay on for a couple minutes, and we really do want to appreciate that you're here with us, and we want to thank you. So I'm going to check the chat, and then I will also turn off the recording in just a moment. So you're very welcome. I appreciate the acknowledgement in the chat, and yes, Dr. Shaw was wonderful. It's great to have her as a co-presenter, and I'm just going to stop the recording right now, so everyone have a good evening, and if you have questions, stay on. Thank you for coming.